Good evening, El Paso. Welcome to Philosophic Dialogues from La Frontera, where our mission is to share the fun of the big questions with you. My name is Dr. Kim Diaz, and I teach philosophy at El Paso Community College.
And my name is Jules Simon, and I practice philosophy at the University of Texas at El Paso. And in keeping with the theme of philosophic dialogues for our show, we're very excited to share with you that our guest for today comes to us literally from the other side of the world to talk with us about philosophy. I first came to know today's guest, Dr. Ajay Verma, nearly 10 years ago when I traveled to India to train to become a yoga teacher at an ashram in the Himalayas. And Dr. Verma graciously invited me to give a talk at a symposium he organized in the Department of Philosophy at Delhi University, where he was working at the time. Kim came to know him in 2014 when we both traveled to India to study yoga. And once again, Dr. Verma arranged for us both to give talks, but at the Center for Philosophy at Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he had subsequently transferred. Since then, we invited Dr. Verma to give a talk at University of Texas, El Paso, entitled, and the talk was entitled Body as the Site of Ethics, Perspectives from Indian Philosophy in September 2017, where he captivated the audience with his expert reflections on Indian metaphysics. As a dedicated scholar and teacher, he successfully directed numerous graduate students in their MA, MPhil, and PhD work at JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and published 2 books and numerous scholarly articles. His single-authored book is entitled From Method to Playfulness to Chaos, A Critique of Postmodernism. And he has also co-edited a book with Akash Singh, Dr. Ambedkar's Buddha and his Dhamma, a critical edition. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not convey to our audience that besides being a highly accomplished international scholar, Dr. Verma takes his commitment to sharing philosophy with everyday people seriously by having given almost 100 lectures on public television in India on various aspects of philosophy in general and classical Indian philosophy in particular. One of those lectures was on the very topic of our very first question for him. That is, what is philosophy?
Thanks for such a wonderful introduction. The question that you're asking me, your first question is the most fundamental and also sort of the most important question. Certainly, and also sort of, simplest of questions are also in a certain way hardest to answer. So I have to be a little bit sort of very cautious and reflective when I respond to this question. But and also let's not forget that this question of late is being taken very seriously in the technical sense as well. There's a lot that's been written on the nature of philosophy as such, what defines, what distinguishes it as a subject domain, and so on. My sort of view of this is that philosophy, we start doing philosophy when we start sort of going beyond the givenness of what we see around us. Mm-hmm. So there's a Chinese saying that comes to my mind right now. Rivers are rivers, mountains are mountains. And the second line goes, rivers are no more rivers, mountains are no more mountains. And the third line goes, rivers are again rivers, mountains are again mountains. So this looks sort of ridiculous if you hear, but the point here is that when you take the given as given, like rivers are rivers, mountains are mountains, that's the end of the sort of that's the end of it. So that this is when probably we are sort of not being as philosophical as we could possibly be. So when you start sort of going beyond the given and start questioning it in certain ways. What is it about the river that is a river? What makes the river a river? Is there something that is inherent in it, in the river, which because of which it is a river? Is sort of what is a chair? Is chair how we use it? or a chair is independently a chair, sort of irrespective of how we use it, irrespective of how we think of it. Uh, so these are, some of the ways of looking at the world, and the way we look at the world also affects the way we live in numerous ways. If we think a tree is how we use it, it could lead to certain consequences, sort of, which may or may not be good for us. So may be sort of good for us in short run, but in the long run, it may not be sustainable. So this is just an example of how how there could be numerous ways of looking at things, thinking about them, thinking beyond their bare givenness, forming beliefs, examining those beliefs, coming up, revising our beliefs. These are, some of the things I think form the core of the discipline of philosophy. Another thing I would like to add is that philosophy, by and large, I'm not saying this is the essential characteristic or should be an essential characteristic of philosophy as a subject, but in philosophy, we want to be methodic, we want to be systematic, connecting with the world, which could be, say, for example, through some artistic modes. I may tell you a story. I may create an artwork. I may create a myth. And that myth, uh, you know, would be able to sort of sustain itself across time, like maybe a systematic explanation may not. Say, for example, myths like Sisyphus. The idea behind it, I mean, look at the brevity of the idea. It's such a small idea. It's guy just rolling a stone up the hill and fails. There seems to be sort of nothing extraordinary about it. As a matter of fact, looks like a pretty ordinary guy. But he's a philosophical hero, and this guy is going to survive in philosophy. He's not going to go away anywhere. So uh, there could be these other ways of trying to formulate our understanding of the world, which may not be so immediately, may not appear to be very systematic, but does present to us some, some way the world has been understood, could be understood, human predicaments could be understood. So that is what makes philosophy fantastic. And I was a student of literature during my graduation. I enjoyed doing what I was doing at that time, and philosophy added a different dimension to it, which I enjoyed equally, if not more. Also, if you allow me to add sort of slightly one more thing, also philosophy is has this amazing distinction that it connects to other disciplines like no other discipline does,
Mm.
right? Of late we have started talking about psychology of philosophy, but philosophy has this amazing capacity to relate to other subjects, like we have philosophy of science. I think science of philosophy is still to be discovered, if it is ever possible. We have philosophy of mind. We have now philosophy of biology. What gives philosophy this capacity to connect to other subjects? I think the reason is the same. And then, we want to master the discipline. So this is the reason why we have master degrees. And then after that, it's very natural. There's something amiss if certain questions don't come to your mind. So certain questions are bound to arise. This is what makes us human in the first place. And once we start going beyond the given here would mean the already existent corpus of knowledge. So once we start going beyond that and start taking our questions seriously, start working on them, this is when we enter into the philosophy of that discipline. and this is the reason why connected to all the other disciplines. Because also all the research degrees, as we know, be it MPhil, be it PhD, are given in the name of philosophy. The Master of Philosophy of a particular discipline is when you get an MPhil degree. You become a doctorate of philosophy in a particular discipline. So, 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 being philosophical at some point of time after you have sort of, you've trained yourself into a discipline, being a philosopher in that discipline has to be inevitable. So this is how it goes.
You're a philosopher after my own heart, Ajay, because what you were describing is what I call kitchen sink philosophy. So how do you go beyond? How do you go beyond the given? Well, you can go beyond it systematically, but as you said, there's also non-systematic philosophic responses, and it connects us to everything. So basically, philosophy is all there is in the kitchen sink. It provides us with everything.
Yeah. So I mean, we couldn't.
But anyway,
it's
just
better. Yeah. Thanks.
a quick comment.
I have a couple of questions for you, Dr. Verma.
Sure.
So, how did you come to philosophy? And why did you decide to study philosophy? So, how and why philosophy for you?
Oh, okay. I have to be a little candid here, and I would sure be. So, as a matter of fact, what had happened was that, like, when I was a science student. After like I mean after in India, I don't know how it goes elsewhere in the world. In India, we follow this 10+2 system. So we have 10 years of certain schooling where there is a certain set of subjects that all of us study, and after that we have a choice to either study commerce, arts, or science. So I used to have a lot of interest for some reason in science, especially in sort of in pure science. So quantum physics and relativity. These were some of the areas that used to sort of interest me a lot. As a matter of fact, at that time there used to be this educational TV. There used to be only one TV channel, which was run by the government. There were no private channels, and so there used to be one dedicated hour for higher studies. So I used to watch TV around that time, and that used to trigger sort of ideas in me, so much so that I used to like at times write. To the presenters there, and they were to my utter surprise they would respond back. So I would always have a lot of respect for these professors and teachers who were there on the other side of the screen. They would respond quickly. It was during that period I started exploring some of the philosophical literature. In India, we have this, or we used to have. I don't know whether we still have it, because now sort of books are available sort of online as well. So we used to have this public library system, and I was really fortunate that I was in the capital of India. So it was called Delhi Public Libraries. The government used to run several of these libraries. The biggest of all was located in what is called Old Delhi area. I used to often visit that place, and sort of used to get books issued. And there was an entire section on philosophy which used to interest me most. So I was picking up books from there. As a matter of fact, I don't know, maybe sort of, I'm telling too much about myself. You can always kind of edit it later on. But sort of, like some of those books used to interest me so much that I came across this book and I just didn't want to return it. So I just wanted to possess it. I didn't want to sort of let it go. This book was sort of called "In the Woods of God's Realization." So this is by a mathematician. As a matter of fact, you sort of may be interesting for you to sort of know. He later sort of like renounced everything. He left his job and became a kind of saint. Even delivered lectures, by the way, in the US. So he was a mathematician, and the way he sort of talks about human predicaments and so on is very interesting. His very first lecture, sort of, he starts from mathematics and makes a foray into sort of, saying some very interesting things about human predicament. So this is, the book that I'm talking about. And then later on, I realized this is not an ethical thing to do. If I keep this book, then there are readers who are going to get deprived of it. I just discovered it by chance. Maybe sort of, this book is waiting to be discovered by some other people also. So I went back and I sort of, and I want to return the book, and I realized that the fine on that book by the time was more than the price of the book. It should be there to be discovered. So nonetheless, so this is how I got interested in philosophy. I went to apply. Very few colleges at that time used to offer masters in philosophy, bachelors in philosophy, BA program in philosophy. As a matter of fact, for men, there used to be only two colleges. I applied with both of them, got admission, but sort of most of my friends, well-wishers, told me it's a very difficult thing to make a career in philosophy. So, I was dissuaded. I was told that you better do something else. And just around that time, I was offered admission in English literature. So I was told that if nothing else, you could find yourself teaching English in schools. If nothing else, there are a lot of these school jobs. So in India, sort of, job is very important. I think anywhere else. So this is sort of how I ended up doing literature. But then, like during sort of by the time and what was happening, what I found myself doing was, while I was studying literature, I found myself reading a lot of books on philosophy. A lot of that was general popular sort of books, including Zen and the Art Motorcycle Maintenance, one of the books I really, really liked. And our college library also had a section, philosophy section. So I used to pick up books from there. So I was reading, I was doing a good lot of reading on philosophy around that time. And then sort of, I finally made up my mind that and also literature itself had a lot of philosophy component. So we had sort of one paper, and we studied existentialist philosophy as a part of that. Absurdism. Sort of we were studying we were reading Camus. We were reading Samuel Beckett. We were reading romanticists. We were reading S.T. Coleridge. We read Kubla Khan, and sort of, I came to know that Coleridge wrote Kubla Khan while he was under the influence of opium. So it raised very philosophical questions for me, like whether we could really say that he was writing. Who was writing if he was under the influence? He sort of was it some like alter personality of his? So philosophy kind of sort of was very much there. So in MA I thought, let me pursue what I actually want to, and I finally took admission in MA, and so I was very happy to do that. I discovered some very good set of friends there, and I'm still in touch with them. I mean, they keep my sort of spirits up, and we used to have a lot of philosophical discussions. And I academically also, I sort of made a discovery of myself. I did very well, much better than I was doing in literature.
So this is an interesting follow-up question, because you were into science and then literature, and then you surrendered to philosophy. So then our next question is, I don't know if you think about this, or what would you say to a person who would ask you, if a person is a philosopher, by nature, like a natural, right? Or does one become one? And I suppose, we could say the same thing about many things, an actor or a musician. But when it comes to philosophy, do you think that some people are just more philosophical naturally than others? Or, is one a philosopher, or can people become philosophers?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question.
Thank you. I thought so too.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's and also a very philosophical question for that matter. Yeah, this is like, I mean, I think this is a debate that has been going on in many of the, like, many sort of I mean, subdomains within philosophy. This is also sort of, like, what we call nature versus nurture debate, and there have been no answers forthcoming. I mean, sort of right now I'm teaching a course on grammarian tradition in within classical Indian philosophy. So same debate there. Sort of, one of the parts of the debate is the same. Do we sort of learn language through the inputs that we receive from around us? So, uh, so, like, I mean, is language a learned behavior of a certain kind, or sort of, maybe there is some kind of an innate capacity in us, sort of, which kind of grows. Similar kind of debate exists, in sort of in perception. Uh, Perception requires our sense organ get in touch with the object of perception. But is that it? No, there's much else going on because it's a neurological process. So there have been cases where certain somebody who lost vision very early on, the vision was later restored because of the advancements in medical science. But the person who underwent treatment like saw things but didn't perceive them. That means like, I mean, a particular sort of neurological module that requires to process the data, it has a particular period within which it grows, and this person after 30 is already past that sort of age. So growth of that, something inside the brain, the growth that should have happened given that particular time, did not happen. So eyes, like, there's a contact between sense organ and the object, but perception is not happening. So yeah, this is an interesting debate, and I think it's both, like everybody says.
Okay.
Uh, I think sort of there are no sort of like research suggesting that it's this way or that. So I would like to sort of like to answer this question by sort of telling a funny story. So I think it goes something like this. I mean, if we relate it to our choices in life, so what happens actually is that sort of we do have choices at any given point of time. But the moment we take a choice, we leave a certain part behind. Past cannot be changed. So changes happen, and we sort of and sort of they, and they sort of start forming a part of history. So there is this funny story where one of the Sufi saints, he tells his disciple, the disciple is standing, he says, move one of your legs up. So take sort of one of your legs up. So stand on one leg. Now the disciple has a choice. He says, which one? So the Sufi master says, whichever you choose. So he says, okay. He sort of chooses to lift his left leg up. Then he says, now the second leg up. That's not your choice. That's not your choice. You have limited your choice, beforehand. So I think this is how, sort of the life goes as well.
Okay.
I want to come back. Speaking of choices, I want to come back to the part of your narrative when you were talking about falling in love with a book. It had this math book, right? And so it reminded me that as you were talking, it reminded me very much of Plato and the cave analogy, the cave allegory, right? And so the book is kind of like you finding your way out of the cave, right? But you wanted to keep the book and kind of stay out of the cave. But you had to make a choice to give the book back or keep the book. And by giving the book back, it was like you were going back into the cave to give the book, to make the book available to other people who are all chained up to their, chained up in their chairs, right? So that made me think of that.
Right. That's a nice way of sort of putting it. But sort of I'm like I mean that book was really good. But sort of like I mean philosophy is always an ongoing activity. There's no end to it. So
you had to overcome that temptation to keep it.
Yeah.
Then that's help others achieve or have access to knowledge. So that was the point I was thinking of. And I know you're interested in Buddhist philosophy as well, Ajay, Dr. Verma.
Yes.
You're both my friend and my colleague, so I'll probably switch back and forth, right?
Please. I love to be called by my first name.
You have the phenomenon of the bodhisattva, which is similar to the philosopher going back and helping others, right?
Right. I think sort of like I mean this is why sort of like if you acknowledge sort of in the proper sense of the term, especially the way sort of we like the way some of the ancient philosophical traditions talk about it. Sort of I study classical Indian sort of systems of thought, so I would be able to talk only from those perspectives. So there is, like I mean, a saying which goes like "Sa vidya ya vimuktai," meaning knowledge is what liberates. So, soteriological aspect of knowledge, that knowledge is always transformative. That is a very, very important sort of part of doing philosophy, and is never lost sight of as far as classical Indian philosophy goes. As a matter of fact, all the systems of philosophy within classical sort of within classical Indian sort of traditions, all of them offer a soteriological program. So like I mean, all of them would say that we are going into an inquiry into, say, for example, nature of knowledge, into the nature of duty. So into the nature of ultimate reality. It could be certain the inquiries could be regarding several things, and result is the same. Some kind of sort of freedom from sort of specific ways of thinking, like very, very aptly put. At times we are held, our own captive. We become attached to knowledge for that matter. We don't want to let go of it. So unless knowledge sort of, brings a little bit of good change in you, it actually invariably would. This is how I look at it. It cannot not happen that sort of, you read something by heart and sort of wouldn't give you certain perspective, but it wouldn't change you as a person. It I think does. With scientists also sort of same happens. I mean, they sort of they probably they have different views of sort of looking at the world entirely. They transform themselves as persons. If you read the biography of Newton, there were so many changes that kept occurring.
So what makes a philosopher different from an average person? What's so special? Because to me, it seems like your everyday person, if they have experiences and they acquire new knowledge, in a way, that changes them. So how is a philosopher different than a person, than a regular person? Like if I haven't had orange juice and then I taste orange juice for the very first time, or a different dish, or I don't know, a new ingredient, something new, a new fruit. Well, now
Okay.
I have a new perspective and it has changed me to some degree. So, how is the average person, regular person, different than a philosopher? What, or easier, what makes a philosopher?
Well, sort of, again, a very interesting question. Sort of, I think, here we'll have to distinguish between in now what we call the appellation philosopher and the connotation it carries within the formal discipline of philosophy. And the moment we start talking about the transformative aspect of philosophy, which some sort of formally academically trained philosophers may or may not want to agree with. So academia, sort of the way it works, it functions now, and it has a long sort of more than 1,000 years of history. As a matter of fact, like, if you look at look at the history, I think the history goes back probably sort of a couple of 1,000 years, sort of back. It also sort of we'll have to differentiate between these two domains. If we talk about a pure academic sort of philosophy, then it works sort of a little differently. So there are different methods of doing philosophy, and this distinction is pretty sharp, and all of us know that. So there is anti-philosophy where we want to be sort of purely concerned with definitions, going beyond ordinary language, and so on and so forth. Even when we talk about human experiences, there, the set of questions that we ask are very different in nature. Set of questions is like, how is my blue different from your blue? I mean, in the sense that, like, if when I have a perception of blue, is it the same perception of blue that you have when we look at blue? There's no way of finding that out. I would never know how sort of Jews sort of came, what kind of experience Jews sort of came have when they have a glimpse of color blue. So these are some of the set of questions that they would ask. Whereas, say, for example, existentialists would ask a very different set of questions. Their methodology is very different. They wouldn't say that meaning lies inherent in a word, or they're not interested in these debates of sense and reference, and so on and so forth. So they're like their concern is human predicament. And most of these existentialist philosophers are literally sort of writers, and better known as writers. If we talk about philosophy in purely academic sense, then our definition has to be different. But if we talk about some of the ancient traditions, some of the ancient ways of like doing philosophy, the distinctions are not so sharp. They were I think there was like a lot of flexibility, say, for example, within Indian sort of classical Indian traditions. We have nine sort of schools of thought, but apart from that, also there are so many ideas, uh, which are philosophical in a certain sense, which could be transformative. So, talking about it in an ordinary sense, we cannot not be philosophers. So, because I believe it's a part of human nature to question. So probably I'm contradicting myself, like when I say that I think we are in a certain way naturally philosophers because we reflect over what goes on with us. We raise questions, and this is what makes us human. It's a part of our being human. If it's a part of our being human, then as you being human, we cannot not be philosophers.
And you mentioned a handful of them, right? At least the academic philosophy, you mentioned
Existentialism, analytic philosophy,
ancient traditions,
ancient Indian traditions of
right?
philosophy.
And
Right.
Yeah, so our next question is, is one of these ways closer to the truth than others?
Wait, let me add a caveat to that. So what you've been talking about is openness to change and the potential for transformative action, right? So is there some way to think about an answer to responding to Kim's question about being closer to the truth and still maintain, this issue of transformation, right? So you're saying to be philosophical means to be open, to be transformed, and to see things from a different perspective, if I can rephrase what you were saying.
Mhm.
But then there are those philosophers who think there's a one standard for truth, and you
Mhm.
have to approximate to that standard, right?
Yeah.
So being close to the truth or knowing the truth, maybe that's what constitutes a philosopher or doing philosophy, right? Is this issue of
Right.
truth.
Right. As a matter of fact, sort of, I'm like, I'm tempted to make a little bit of sort of like, I mean, kind of a tall statement, which I'm not sure whether I should be making, given sort of, but I believe that sort of, anybody who says that there is one way, sort of, there is just one way.
My way.
Uh, yeah, mostly my way. Yeah, of surfing like I'm not reaching the truth. I think that person is least qualified to be called a philosopher.
Mm.
Because the way I look at philosophy, I think it's a part of the nature of philosophy to be questioning. If philosophy is not questioning, then it's not philosophy proper. So we want to be methodic, systematic in our search. That is probably what distinguishes us. Mainly, probably this is contestable, of course. Maybe from say for example, artistic understanding. Uh, but philosophy would not adhere to, I think, this at all.
So we should be careful when we believe that we got something right.
Oh, yeah. I think the value of philosophy lies not in the destination. Value of philosophy lies in the search it signifies. So in that sense, like it is a way of searching rather than and all, of course, like, I mean, your question is also important because I often talk about this with my research students. Generally, whenever I'm meeting them for the, like, I'm having my first meeting with them, I tell them about these two different notions of education, so to speak. So some people may want to believe that whatever ever was to be known should have been known. Whatever there is to be known is already known. And where is it? Where are those answers? Those answers lie in scriptures. So some people, we may differ from like, I mean, somebody would say, well, it's that book. Somebody would say, no, it's that book, it's that other book, whichever book that could be. So education, if this is how we look at it, would mean the recycling answers. So like learning those answers. Present academia is like I mean is premised on along very different lines. So after enlightenment, we don't want to follow that model. We question. We want to generate new knowledge. We don't want to say, well, this is the final answer on it. This is why we have research degrees. And research is very crucial component of any university structure. We want to generate new knowledge. We don't want to be content with the old answers. So this is very important. So we don't want to say, well, this is the way. Final answers have been already delivered. I think we would cease to do philosophy the moment we say that.
Okay, so we have about time for two more questions, and then we want to leave some time for you to ask us some questions. But what you're telling me, what I'm hearing you when you talk about scripture and the truth is in the scripture, but being open to questioning is what distinguishes us from that kind of absolutist sense of truth, right? Philosophy is someone, a philosopher is someone who's open to questioning and who raises questions. Can you tell us a little bit more about how, what you've been saying relates to your formal training, but also your propensity to practice hermeneutics as a methodology and raising questions hermeneutically to classical Indian philosophy?
But before you do that, please share with us what does hermeneutics mean?
Oh yeah, just a quick
Okay. That's a very interesting
definition
question.
of hermeneutics, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So, I have this tendency of giving long answers. So, but sort of I would just whenever I talk about hermeneutics, then I sort of talk about the origin of the word, etymological meaning of the word. The story goes back to Hermes. In sort of Greek mythology. So Hermes, as we know, is a messenger of sort of God, and certainly he has to deliver a message to the people. God, so he connects, the divine world with the ordinary, lived, world, quote unquote. Now, when somebody carries a message, there is likely to be a loss of meaning. So, the example that I tend to give to my students is that of Chinese whispers. So, you whisper a word into the ear of the person sitting next to you, and you form a circle. The word comes back to you, and you are surprised to see there is no more the same word. This is not what you said, right? So this is what happens. Something is written, and the meaning there could be sort of when there is a gap between the reader and the writer. Now there could be several ways of looking at it. Somebody could say, well, there is a message within the book, and there's an intention behind it, pure intention, so to speak, and this is what you're looking after as a reader. So stop projecting yourself into the book. Bring sort of your prejudices, your biases down. What Heidegger would say, historical, effective historical consciousness. You'll have to extinguish it so that the meaning, intended meaning within the book comes to the fore. But then Heidegger sort of dismisses that idea. He says a lot of, he doesn't say it in as many words, but sort of for the sake of understanding, a lot of these sort of elements of effective historical consciousness stay in our subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
We are at times not even aware of them. So this is why we engage in dialogues. When I'm sort of dialoguing with you, say for example, Jules tells me certain things. This is how I thought. This is what I thought you were talking about. And then I realize something about myself. Oh, that's a glimpse about myself, right? So this is how it goes in circle. This is something that Heidegger calls hermeneutical circle. So there could be these two different ways of looking at the text, and goes that could be also connected to our previous question. This connects also to two ways of two different notions of education. We may want to believe that there is an answer written in the book, already delivered, and I have to suppress myself in order to have a glimpse of that answer. Heidegger would tell us, Gadamer later on would tell this more emphatically, that whenever I read a book, I read myself into the book. Mm-hmm. I just can't suppress myself. And book is also nothing except when it is being read. A book lying in the shelf is actually not a book. It's kind of craving to be read. It has a life of its own. A painting is nothing within the four walls. So, as Gadamer would say, an artwork is not an artwork within four walls. One wall has to come down, and that one wall, the fourth wall, has to be the reader, has to be the viewer. And this is when the all of a sudden the artwork becomes alive. So this is sort of how I tend to look at sort of hermeneutics, and I find this very interesting.
We have more questions for you, but we would like to ask you if you have questions for us.
So my question to you would be something sort of like I'm now that I've been always interested in knowing is that a lot of people say that say for example we made these distinctions like in India there are courses on classical Indian philosophy, Western philosophy. If we say history of Indian philosophy makes sense to me. If we say history of Western philosophy makes sense to me. But do you really believe in these distinctions like Latin American philosophy, like Indian philosophy, like Western philosophy? Uh, if you think that these distinctions are sort of, do hold meaning of whatever kind, then what kind of distinction is this? Should we hold it, or what do you think about it?
Would you like to go first, or
No,
would you
go
like me
ahead.
to? Me? Okay.
You asked him about.
Yeah, so to me it's I'm gonna answer in a very, very simple way. To me, it's like philosophy, it's all philosophy, right? It's all
Yeah.
philosophy. Like like food is food. But even within food, there are different types of food, right? There's vegetables and pasta and right carbohydrates, or meat, right? Protein, or different cuisines, right? So to me, that's how I would explain it. It's all philosophy, but um, the flavors are different depending on the combination of where, what part of the world, what part of history there's certain questions being asked that are particular of that space and time. That's how I would answer it.
Yeah, and it's similarly, it's so our show is called Philosophic Dialogues from La Frontera. So, and La Frontera presupposes that borders are real. So, and that there are differences and distinctions between this and that, between this person and that person, this country and that country, and between different ways to practice philosophy. So, when I want to read about philosophy that has a bit of a curry flavor, I'm not going to pick up Vasconcelos, or a book by Anzaldúa, which are Latin American philosophers, right? Latino philosophers. I'm going to turn to a book by Verma, or Bhattacharya, or
Amdekar.
Ambedkar, right? Or Gandhi. So I'm going to turn to different philosophers and different philosophies for different kinds of teachings based upon this mix, to come back all the way to the beginning of our questioning, of what we're predisposed to and what we're educated towards in our educational systems, right? So it's kind of like that mix. Philosophy is right there, helping us to evaluate what these differences are. I think philosophy plays that role. And you can only do that by being immersed in more than one tradition.
That reminds me of, on an informal note, like I tasted some wonderful Latin American dishes, while you were hosting me. So, like, get reminded of that. Thank you so much. I'm not staying there in
That's
El
right.
Paso.
I will never forget your first taste of a burrito.
Oh yeah, exactly. So I really enjoyed those different dishes. Like I also that Latin American restaurant in Juarez, where you had very graciously taken me. It was like those 3-4 hours were I mean, my most memorable experience during my visit to the US. So yeah.
Yeah,
That,
and we
that,
can say the same thing because we've been friends now for going on several years with each other.
that's
We can say the
right.
same thing about you. We have wonderful food memories and philosophy memories with you. So already
Thank you so much.
building
Well,
up in our relationship.
yeah, yeah. Yes, thanks so much.
Dr. Verma, we would like to ask you to please share with us any current projects you may be working on.
So one of the projects that I'm currently working on, that we are currently working on, as a matter of fact, so is what we call building bridges between Latin American philosophy and classical Indian philosophy, and Dr. Kim Diaz, Professor Simon, and I have been this has been, I think, 3 years ever since. So we had organized a seminar at Jawaharlal Nehru University, with the same title, where we were able to host some very good speakers who spoke from Latin American philosophical perspective. And the idea behind it is this no more I mean, this is now, I mean, this is something that can clearly seen that within the domain of philosophy, there are certain certain kind of ways of doing philosophy which have dominated the discipline so far. And the process, what has ended up happening is that some of the alternative ways of doing philosophy, which includes the Latin American ways of looking at things, classical Indian philosophy, though it's taught elsewhere in the world, many of them I mean, many of these departments where it's taught are actually part of philosophy proper. But many of these, it's just it's dominantly kind of relegated as South, something that pertains to the box, so to speak, of South Asian ways of thinking,
Mhm.
or Latin American ways of thinking. So part of Latin American studies, part of South Asian studies. So, but from the philosophical point of view, also these are very, very robust ideas, and it is very strange that just like in as far as popular TV is concerned, we come to know a whole lot of things about the US, about the Europe, then probably we know about some of the parts of our own country. So we are bombarded with the information on the first world, so to speak. And what has eventually come to be known as Eurocentrism. So, so I think this is time that certainly some of the other philosophies try to connect directly with each other rather than through a via media. And this was an effort in that direction, and I believe first of its kind, because at least in India, I'm not aware of any effort until date which where any effort was made to to build a bridge. As this was something that was the title was suggested by Professor Simon, and it turned out to be a very good title that rightly expresses the thought behind it. So we were so the effort is to build a bridge right across. So without any kind of set view of methodology or whatever. So this is like trying to form a direct connection between certain ways of looking at things, and some kind of dialogue happening between the two traditions. And we have been we have some papers that were read during that time. We are in the process of editing it. So Professor Simon and Dr. Kim Diaz would probably be able to say more on that. So this is one of my this is one of the projects that I am very passionate about at the moment, if you allow me to put it like that. Hope it's not non-philosophical way of putting it. So I'm sort of really passionate about this project. So I'm sure we'll bring out something.
As we are too.
Mm-hmm.
Say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so passionate that we'll see you in 24 hours to talk about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I really want to thank you, Ajay, for honoring us with this conversation. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
No, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for inviting me. I sort of really enjoyed speaking to both of you.
I would like to give here Dr. Verma's information in case anybody is interested in continuing to ask him questions. His email is ajverma@jnu.ac.in in case you have questions.
In case you're looking to have more fun in raising the big questions in life.
Thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Ajay.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Pleasure was all mine. Thank you.